and finally the two Bluebell engines setting off to return to their home line. Sadly, the opportunity to run these through trains ceased with the closure of the BR link to Horsted Keynes on the 28th of October 1963, just a few weeks after the event featured here. Now, however, nearly 30 years later, the Bluebell line is extending northwards from Horsted Keynes towards East Grinstead. We all hope the Bluebell Railway reaches its goal. The pioneer of the preservation movement of the British Standard Gauge Steam Railway deserves such success. In part 2, we shall concentrate on the standard gauge. The first line we see was little more than a stone's throw from Ivor's home in the Royal Crescent in Bath, a system owned by the Bath Gas Company. The works were sited to the north of the Midland Railway line at Bath, almost opposite the point where the Somerset and Dorset line joined the main line, half a mile to the west of Green Park Station. The gas company was one of the first customers to link with the Midland line when it reached the city in 1869. The gasworks owned two locomotives in the early 1960s. This is the larger of the two, an 040 saddle tank built by Avonside of Bristol. The maker's plate reveals that the Avonside tank was built in 1929. The other locomotive, owned by the gasworks, sadly not captured on film by Ivo on this visit, was a little Peckett 040 dating from 1912. From Bath, we head only a short distance westwards to the extensive system operated by the Port of Bristol Authority at Avonmouth. As at Bath, all examples of steam motive power were saddle tanks, built either by Avonside or Peckett, both Bristol firms. In 1963, when Ivo visited Avonmouth, steam was still the main motive power. Diesels were yet to gain the upper hand. This first sequence features Peckett S10 named Hallen and built in 1943, hauling out two Avonsides, S4 Percy and S5 Bryan, both of 1918 vintage. By the early 1960s, the Port of Bristol Authority had started to make use of diesel traction, and all steam locos were given an S prefix to their running numbers. Steam locomotives were still very much in evidence, and here Hallen draws a rake of three more engines out of the large motive power depot, especially for Ivor's benefit. The appropriate photographs having been taken, Ivo returns to his cine camera once more as Hallen shunts the locomotives back into the depths of the shed. We next visit Wirksworth. Now we're in Derbyshire, about 4 miles to the south of Matlock. Wirksworth, once served by the Midland Railway, was the terminus of a branch line from Duffield. Nearby, to the north, ran the Cromford and High Peak Railway, to be seen in a future volume of the Ivo Peters collection. On this occasion, however, the purpose of Ivo's visit was to film a private railway system built to serve the Middle Peak Stone quarries. The engine coming into view is an 040 saddle tank, built by Peckett in 1912 and named Uppingham. She'd been transferred here from the Market Overton quarries in Rutland in 1948. Ivo recalled that the most noticeable feature of the locomotive was the very short wheelbase, the reason for which will become apparent soon. Ivor's request, "I don't suppose you could pull the other one out of the shed, please," meets with its usual success, although, as he later confessed, he did not find this the most attractive of locomotives. The chimney seemed far too short, and the cab was most peculiar, being almost offset. Nevertheless, Holwell No. 3, as the loco was named, was an interesting engine, built by Black Hawthorne in 1873. She'd worked previously at the Harloxton Ironstone system in Lincolnshire, owned by the Holwell Iron Company, hence her name. She survived until 1977 and was purchased by the Stevenson and Hawthorne Locomotive Trust for preservation on the Tanfield Railway near Gateshead, where she was built. Now Uppingham gets to work, shunting some empty stone hoppers. And here's the reason for the locomotive's short wheelbase, an extremely tight curve. And again, for Ivor's benefit, a final run past, or perhaps more accurately, a final lurch past. Uppingham was also destined to be purchased and moved for preservation to the Midland Railway Trust Centre at Butterley. Next we visit Leicestershire and the private railway system serving the Buckminster ironstone quarries of Stewart's and Lloyd's. We're now a few miles east of Melton Mowbray, quite close to the boundary with Lincolnshire. As was once common practice with many of the privately owned industrial railways of the British Isles, some of the locomotives working the Buckminster system carried nameplates bearing local place names. On this visit, two such examples, Gunby and Stainby, both named after small villages close to the quarries, were filmed by Ivo. This is Gunby, an Austerity 060 saddle tank built by Hunslet in 1941, here running through the countryside with a load of ironstone. Gunby was destined for preservation and is today to be found at the East Anglian Railway Museum near Colchester. And this is Jason, another 060 saddle tank, and a most interesting engine built by Robert Stevenson in 1905. Ivo was fortunate to find her in action because by the time of this visit, towards the end of May 1963, the locomotive was not put into steam very frequently.